Hey now, and welcome to episode 47 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. But if this is your first time listening to us, welcome. I'm your host, Rubin. And as always, Stan is on the line as well. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man.
Awesome. So, yeah, this was a good episode. We had on Dr. Richard Waterloo again. And I think it's going to be hard for us to really have episodes going forward that aren't rooted in the coronavirus pandemic and the reality around us. I know, like, we want to try to provide other content that gets people, can provide an escape, I guess, or whatever. But I think it's going to kind of overshadow all of our conversations. Would you agree, Stan?
Yeah, and I hope with today's discussion we kind of at least twisted the current narrative, so that it is somewhat of an escape.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah,
because I do think that's you need to be abreast of what's going on around you in your community, in your state, in your country, to stay safe and to stay sane. But we also want to make sure people stay weird. And so I think to do that, we need to have a different perspective. And so hopefully going forward with whatever guests we have on, we can help provide a different way to look at the situation, or a way to, escape and envision a different situation that arises from it. And so I think having Dr. Waterloo on was a great attempt at doing that, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Rich, thanks for coming on. We had you on a little bit ago to talk about your book, and since then the world is broken, and these are very weird times, and I think they deserve weird discussion. So I hope you take that as a compliment, but that's why we wanted to have you come back on. So thanks for coming on.
Yep, glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into some other topics, how are you dealing with this with your family and everything? And I know pretty much everyone at this point listening to this is going to be on a mandatory lockdown and stuck in their house and laid off. So, how are you doing with all that and your mindset and everything?
I'm enjoying it. I have my family, and we're all safe. We're stocked up on food. I could probably go 75 to 100 days for the family of four of us, and we are here until we're not. So we're taking it one day at a time. And then, one thing I'm playing with is because I have 2 deployments under my belt through the Army back in 2003 and 2006. I have about a year each on those, and I'm treating this as my third deployment. And so the way I'm looking at it is I have maybe 4-6 months ahead of me, and I know from the first deployment it was really tough, and the second deployment was kind of tough as well. But about a week in, and then throughout, you get kind of homesick, and you're just stuck in this land of you're not able to do anything. So this is just like a deployment where you can't do anything. You can't go off base. You can't, but you do have the internet, which we didn't have. And then you have all these little luxuries, and you have your family near you. So I am hunkered down with my family, and we're going to hang out for the next few months. And I'm seeing myself on the other side of it as a survivor of a global pandemic that I can write about or just be a part of along with everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like you said about the homesickness, it's like, I wonder when the homesickness aspect in this for most people would be like going to work, or, you're just like, you're homesick for normality and your schedule and everything like that. But you're right. Like, and it's different being a parent and having kids and family at home with you, that like, you can take this as an opportunity to really embrace what we usually don't have time to do. Like, I've played more street hockey with my kids in the last week than ever. And, I'm pretty sure my youngest son has going to learn how to ride a bike this week and stuff like that, and get the training wheels off. And there's this homesickness to go back to the way that it was, but I think we have to embrace it as like, well, this is our deployment right now, and we have to make the best of it, and it's funny because I see and it may be just personality types, but like I see people are making a choice to either embrace it or wallow in it, and that's what I love about the Help Find the Others Discord and stuff like that, is it seems like we're helping each other embrace it, and you're obviously a huge part of that. And so, I love seeing your mindset and sharing that with people.
Yeah, I think it's forcing people. I noticed at Costco the other day, everybody was present. Like nobody was on their phones or in their heads because the future's been canceled. The lifestyles have been canceled. And so you get to see what people do at a base level of how they handle panic and how they behave. But everybody there was present, which is super helpful in raising awareness of where we are and what's going on in this reality. And so the one thing that we have in common here is the globe that we're all spinning on, and everybody seems more present. And bringing them into that state is, I think, it's a good thing. It's difficult, but I mean, as people who have played with psychedelics, it's difficult, but it's useful.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. That a lot of the things that we talk about in the psychedelic community are being brought to the forefront right now. Managing fear and panic and ego and fear of life and death and all these things. Like, that's really important to have that mindset and outlook on what's going on right now, because the homesickness, right, that we were just talking about, that could be your ego. Like, I just want to go back to the way it was, or whatever. And it's like you're clinging on to like what you think it should be, and you can't, and I think a lot of those lessons that the psychedelic crowd learns and shares, like a lot of people need that right now almost, that the like understanding of controlling what you controlling your reaction, controlling your emotions and your outcome, but you can't control the situation, and you have to ride it out.
It definitely is a good time to be a psychedelic user.
Yeah,
just to have that sense of awareness of where you are and what's going on, even as a stoner, being able to put yourself into a situation and go, oh, that's right, I can't be stoned right now. I have to discuss things, and it just forces you to be grounded. And everybody seems to be, well, they will seem to be grounded here in the next month. But right now
and I mean, it's the meditation has the stuff that we talk about with psychedelics and meditation and Wim Hof and all that has been so beneficial for me. And I've been trying to like, my family and I have sat down and meditated. We did Wim Hof, and my boys took a cold shower, and we did push-ups, and we did all that. And it's like, it's so important. I've been just trying to get that across to my family of like, this is really helping me not freak out. And I know that I can't freak out. If I freak out, then my family is going to all freak out, and they look to me as like the pillar of, how their reaction should be in situations like this. And the meditation has been just key. Like, I'm really grateful for my job, because I've been able to just leave my phone in my truck and go walk in the woods and sit down on a log and meditate like every day for work. And there's so many people that are just sucked in, on their phone all day, getting scared about this. And I think that disconnect and all the stuff that we've been talking about for months with our community, are really just coming they're really helpful right now. And, I'm glad we're supporting each other and sharing, our progress with all that and everything. So one thing I did want to talk about was like, how does being a parent in this situation affect how you're looking at it?
Well, I'm treating it like they've never been through a panic or through something traumatic or possibly traumatic. They're pretty pretty they haven't had that type of experience. So now they get to find out how somebody deals with an experience like this. And I've had my personal experience in war, but then so people just the kids can look to me as a parent and say, well, what's going on? And so what we're doing is that's just I set a good example is what I'm trying to say. And then we're also we're going to revamp our homeschool idea and marry that with our community outreach and help. We're going to help other people. And so whether that means baking and giving out baked goods a couple times a week and just doing runs like that, or selling masks, whatever it is, our homeschool will be intertwined with that project. And I love projects. So taking that project and allowing the kids, whatever the project we're working on, and allowing the kids to work with it shows them that you can make the best of a bad situation. Mm-hmm. And I honestly don't think they're going to feel much of it. Like they're going to feel the loneliness from their friends when my kids are 6 and 8. They're going to feel the loneliness from their friends. And I think they've already gotten over the adjustment period. They've been off school for 2 weeks and they're cool with it. And we do homeschooling. But it's just, we play cribbage and we do some worksheets and just do drills on phonics and math. But I'm involving them in as much of the process as I can, including the budget. So because I lost my job because of this. So we're going to have to rebudget things. So it forces the kids to stop eating the Cheez-Its over and over again. So I'm treating it, I'm not being a dictator about it, but we are rationing food. Like you can't have snacks 5 times right before a meal. So we have planned meals that we have. My wife, she's a great cook, so she makes all these meals, and we have to tell the kids, hey, this is the reason why we have to ration things. And I think it's a great opportunity because this is the direction I want to go with my family is minimalism and living off grid and stuff like that. And to have that type of lifestyle, you need to train yourself to watch what you use. You know, you can't run all the appliances at once if you're off grid. So that's how I'm dealing with it as a parent. I'm loving. I get to spend more time with my kiddos, sleeping with them, snuggling with them, playing cards.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm trying to use it as a learning moment for like you said that there isn't endless amounts of food. There isn't. We've been doing snack rationing too, to where like we put a tub out. Each of my kids have a little tub on the counter with. They can pick 3 snacks to put in there, and that's it for the day. Like they can't snack outside of those tubs, and then we'll have meals. They'll eat, but yeah, that we can't run through all the snacks because then they're not going to be there. But I think that's a good lesson, like you said, of like living more simply. Like that needs to be something that comes out of all of this. Like in my video that I posted a couple days ago, talking about like our food, like. We need to be more community centric and support our local food sources and supplies and providers and cook eateries and all that. But we also need to be more self-sustainable, being prepared so that you don't have to go panic buy at the grocery store, and just having food on hand, but also like. You don't go to the grocery store every day, like when you're going to make dinner. Like it's just you're
you gotta
ready.
Be thoughtful.
Yeah, you plan out your meals more and plan out your budget and all of that. Like that's so important going forward with food, but in everything. Like I believe there's abundance in the universe for everybody, but I think that like that term gets mixed up in thinking that's like everything you want, and it's not. Abundance is that everything you need will be taken care of, and you need to have faith in that, and it's we talk about that with mushroom trips, like mushrooms give you what you need and not what you want. Well, life gives you what you need and not what you want, and like that's what we need to understand from all this, and hopefully that's going forward, like we understand that and understand the importance of community as well, and together our communities can have abundance. But we have to approach that understanding that we may need to live more simple than we may want, and that our commercialism and materialism breeds into us.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens. I mean, we're all forced to look at the resources now. So over the next few months, we have Amazon shipping all this food and all these luxuries everywhere. But with people getting sick in that supply chain, you're going to have actual ration. You may have actual rations. So it's important to consider that the lifestyle is being tested, and it's going to test the systems that we're working with as well, which is it's a great opportunity because we knew that there were flaws, but we could pay our way out of them, right? We'll just make some more money and throw money at it, but you can't buy yourself out of this panic. You can't buy yourself out of the pandemic, and if that's not possible, then we have to actually think about what resources we're using and manage it within what we have, not what we can make up. It reminds me a lot of the dollar. It's just so inflated. It's inflation's on top of inflation.
Yeah, and I mean, all of that is going to be such a struggle to maintain focus, because a majority of the population is not going to get that, unfortunately, and it's going to cause such utter panic and confusion after the fact from a lifestyle standpoint. Not, right now the panic is from a health standpoint of having food and being healthy and not getting sick and not ending up in the hospital. But after, that becomes old news, because that's the unfortunate thing with this virus is like, it's not going to go away. Like, everyone's like, oh, we'll defeat this virus. And it's like, no, we will get to a point where we can learn to live with it. Right now it's so contagious that the reason we're doing all this is so that, our healthcare system can still function. It's not to get rid of the virus. Like, everyone keeps going like, oh, it'll go away by the summer and whatever. It's like, no, it's around, we won't have herd immunity to it for 2 to 5 years. And, everyone's like, oh, they'll come up with a vaccine. And it's like, they've been trying that since before this pandemic. They've been trying to get a vaccine for coronaviruses, and they can't. So, if we were going to have a widely used vaccine before those 2 to 5 years are up, it would require like a medical breakthrough. And so there's just not enough acceptance of that reality going on right now. So everyone's focused on that. But at some point, they'll stop focusing on the numbers and all that, because, once the healthcare system can handle it, they're going to stop covering the virus statistics. And we're going to have this sobering reality of a bullshit campaign election that they're going to try to, turn back on at some point here. And B, the financial problem of having, 30% unemployment, in at least the US, but probably most of the world is going to be in that same situation. And like, how's that all going to shake out? Like, nobody's going to have the lifestyle it's going to be really, really hard to go back to the lifestyle that you had, regardless of what that lifestyle was. And, when we talked at the end of our last episode about, the opportunity, like that's what I was kind of talking about. There's a financial opportunity with markets and stuff like that, because it's all bullshit and it's going to go crazy and you can learn to play that game. But there's an opportunity to change our lifestyle. And, I love, and you've brought it back up, but it's something you've preached for a while, since before this reality of, the goal is land, lumber, and solar panels. So why don't you expand on that idea a little bit?
Well, I mean, if we have these systems that are vulnerable to a virus or any other issue, any other risks that we're all taking. I mean, we're all taking a big risk by being on the same grid. It's a centralized grid with centralized currency, centralized truth, and we're just all dialed in. We accept that. We don't have any diversity in the market of. If we don't have any diversity, these things can easily crash. And so grounding yourself to a permaculture or a more sustainable way of living, uh, you can kind of watch it from the outside. Because I can see if I were off grid right now, then this wouldn't be too much of a problem. I'd be growing my own food and just having the luxuries that come with that. Also, the projects, um, lumber, land, solar panels, wind turbines, growing food. It's a way to reconnect with a different lifestyle if you're into that, and reconnect with the earth if you're into that. But then it's also just a safe bet, because unless Mr. Burns puts a big shield in the sky to block out the sun, then you're pretty much all right. And it's and the cost of that, I'm wondering if like what comes out of this is a ton of solar panels and a way to get people off on a different grid, and just because without paying for the resource of oil, of natural gas, then you have a sun that provides all this free energy, and you could have a socialized energy system, but that wouldn't cost any money at all, like except for the upkeep, you know.
I think all sorts of alternative things are going to arise from this because they have to. Because you know, I used the analogy in the last podcast of like, okay, the fucking plantation house is on fire, and you can help them put it out, you can watch them put it out, or you can run away. And it's like, I think a lot of people are going to choose choice C, and that's how you do it. You have to get off the grid. And it's kind of funny because it's like all the like off the grid prepper people, like everyone kind of laughed at until now, and it's like, shit, everything they did is what everyone's panicking to try to do right now. And I think the economy that comes out of this is going to make everyone reevaluate bills, and like, how do I get rid of bills? Because your dollar, even if you get your job back, most people, their budget is going to change from this at the very least. And we're going to see, people are going to cut the cable more if they have cable, or, get rid of their cell phone plan or whatever. People are going to try to get rid of bills, but one thing is to like, okay, what about this electricity bill? Like, what can I do about that? And I do think, people are going to look to solar and wind and, geothermal for their house or stuff like that. I think there is going to be a big rise in that. And it's going to be economic based, but I think the like subconscious move for that is just kind of like what, the weirdo cats have been tuned into, of like having a more self-reliant, more in tune with nature, more looking for different ways to get, satisfaction out of life, and, living more simply. Like, they're already moving that way. And I think like this will be the jump that makes people that haven't been in tune to that start being in tune to it.
So what about though? Let's say I have my head is at 6 months, right? My 6 months of quarantines and this kind of lifestyle that we're all kind of in, and then a month or two of physical recovery. We got a bunch of places that have just kind of gotten run down and overcome with whatever's rats and stuff like that. So we're gonna have a cleanup from that. But at 6 months, perhaps the system doesn't collapse, right? The political system, and I see the political system as the linchpin for. If you pull that, then the entire system goes to something more totalitarian, and then from there, who knows? But with a 2 to 5 year plan, like you were saying, or maybe even 18 months, my thought is the longer that we stay in this mindset, the further we are from the last mindset that we had. Pardon me. And the easier it is to come up with new realities and just kind of abandon. I mean, you can only listen to that orange man so many times before you tune him out. So after 6 months of listening to him, it's just going to be, well, you know what? We're going to follow the coronavirus protocol. That's a safe move. But we can do something else, and we're seeing each other do other things that are different and more efficient. New things that should have been done over email for the last 10 years. So the longer we stay in it, the more opportunity there is for change, back to a new normal as opposed to returning to the old normal.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of time, like length of this quarantine paired with government checks coming our way. I think if the longer it takes for them to stimulate our own personal economy, the more chance it is for there to be looking elsewhere, for answers, because there's people that can't even afford day to day already. And if there's no stimulus coming our way, then how can we afford rent? How can we afford these bills? And I mean, these companies are not going to shut off the electricity, they say, but I think it's a combination of, not having money paired with, or not having money coming in paired with, length of however long this government quarantine is. And if those two things come together, it can be, I don't know. I'm confused why there's not like looting already, like, I don't know how people are calm enough to the point that they trust that things are going to just work out.
Well, you have a
I
virus
don't
running
get that.
around.
Yeah,
People are
I
very
just
afraid
don't.
of that virus.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But
Yeah.
at a certain point, if the government doesn't step in and help the people on an individual level, that concern is going to go out the window, in my opinion.
Well, they will. The government is going to make it very easy. First off, they're going to get everyone so scared, like they are now, that
Mm-hmm.
they're only looking at how do we get out of this situation right now, and they're not going to look down the road. And they're going to make it real easy to help them put the fire out and to go back to sleep and go back to being a slave. And then once the danger seems clear, then they're going to be like, hey, that was really expensive though, so now we need you all to tighten them bootstraps. You got everyone's got to tighten the belt. This economy, oh man, and that's gonna be how everyone's like thing shifts. Is like, yeah, at least the government saved us there, and
Yeah.
they're gonna make it very easy to do that. It's that's the situation that we're talking about arising of, like, you can just fucking be like, I'm not a part of the rebuild. Like, I'm rebuilding my life. That's where, like, I think the land, lumber, solar panels comes into play. Is like, okay, well, have fun with that, because they're going to have a debt jubilee. Okay, I believe this, that they are going to say, and well, actually they already did, I'm sorry. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac already announced that if you contact your mortgage lender, that you can get without late fees or interest added on. You can not pay your mortgage for up to 12 months. But it's a case by case basis. You have to deal with your servicer. But that, like, the government backed loans or whatever, they're giving a grace period for that. I imagine with all the restaurants closed and stuff like that, there's going to be some mandate made that your leasing agent has to let you not pay your lease for the same amount of time. Credit card companies, all this, they're going to give everyone a leeway. But the thing is that those lenders are going to turn around to the government and be like, give me my money. They're like, we just let them get away without paying it. Give me my money. That's going to come from somewhere. The helicopter money checks that everyone's going to get, that has to come from somewhere. And now the fake money they create to give to the banks to buy their own stock so that the stock market doesn't crash, they don't need that money back. That just is in the system or whatever. But everything that people get benefit from, and everything that, like, limits that is going to come out of Social Security or a tax or whatever. They won't let that money just be magical internet money. Like, anything that people touch that affects them, they're going to take out of our benefit of being in the system. And that's what I mean by, like, it's going to seem like there's a recovery, but it's going to be a dead cat bounce, to use the chart term. And that's why I think the smarter thing is to just be like, fuck it, I'm out, and live as simply as possible. You can't get away from the taxation probably, but getting away from the energy bill and getting off grid and relying on yourself for food, for the most part, not totally, I guess, but being able to be ready for whatever happens. I think that's just the smarter bet. Bet on yourself, because I think it's stupid to bet on the government at this point.
Maybe what comes out of this is more communal type systems, or decentralized systems, that just big varieties of different systems that work. 500 person to 50,000 person, not communes, but ways of distributing or just working with resources.
Yeah, I've already seen it just in my stupid little, suburban cul-de-sac. Like, we're all like, hey, we've got a lasagna that we just defrosted. We can't eat it all. Here's this. And, one guy's like, I got like 2 years worth of meat, so don't worry about blah, blah, blah. And, like we're all like joining together. And, it's a lot. It's easy to like think, oh, everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. Everyone's getting all these guns because they're just going to be, robbing each other's houses and all. And it's like, that's just people's fear. Like, humanity comes together in crisis, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but I've definitely noticed this, like, as a parent. Like, I'm really afraid of like my kids getting hurt all the time. But then the instances where they do get hurt, like, I handle it fine and it's okay, and it's like the fear of the worst case scenario can scare the shit out of you and make you think you're not going to be able to handle it. But like, in moments of actually, the positivity comes through. And I think like humanity is the same way. Like, that's a personal level I'm talking about, but I think humanity like comes together out of tragedy more than it just snowballs out of control.
Yeah, and we're seeing, people are still talking about it, people in these different countries, but if this goes on long enough, then the language or the country of people isn't going to matter as much, which I think is a good thing. Where we have, we're all on this ball, and we have these things called countries, and that makes sense right now. But perhaps there's a better way that we can all interact. And by knowing that if I stay home and I participate in this global ritual, maybe this global exercise, then I can look at this at the way my actions affect other people, and that's, I think, one of the most awareness generating ideas you can think of. Because if you can see yourself as part of a global community, a global organism that wants to survive, then you can look at the other systems that you play with, right, in the way of natural resources, and you can create something.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that the inevitable government outcome once the public health emergency aspect of this is over, and it's just a public health concern, which will happen. Like, that's like, we'll get back to arguing about oil prices and and Russian election interference and all the other things that government tries to have us focus on. There will be, and it's already starting, a lot of finger pointing from governments of like, this is China's fault, this is Iran's fault, this is blah blah blah. And there will be a lot of people that buy into that, and there's a rise of nationalism. But I do think, as this will touch everyone at some point, everyone will have gotten it. Everyone will know someone who got hospitalized for it, and a lot of people will know someone who died from it. Like, that's just the staggering numbers of what's going to happen over the course of the next 5 years with this. And that's without medical, some medicine or vaccine that lessens the chances of dying from it. But everyone will contract it. I think it will, much like you were saying, that like, you can only listen to the orange man so much. Like, our faith and belief in government and the religion that surrounds government, I'm hoping, will be severely shaken for most people out of all of this. But they'll see the humanistic level across the country as people post videos or whatever, share stories on Twitter. All of this thing will be like, no, this impacted everybody. Like, I'm not buying into the finger pointing. There's nobody to blame. The only thing to blame is that we weren't ready for this and we didn't listen to scientists, because like, I looked up, I was going to like show my kids like kind of what a virus is. You know, like you hear all these buzzwords as kids, and it's like let's show you what a virus actually is. So I pulled out my like biology 101 textbook from freshman year of college, which was 2008. And there's a whole thing in there about coronaviruses and their possible pandemic outbreak potential, and that they come out of meat markets in China and like all this stuff, you know? And it's like, so there's been someone in a room at a meeting somewhere with several different presidents and different rotating cabinet members and all this going like, hey, we need more respirators in case of coronavirus pandemic. You know, someone's been saying this all along somewhere, and a lot of people have probably been saying it in a lot of places. Nobody fucking listened, you know? And so I just think like everyone's going to start realizing that, and we're going to become more global and less trusting of government and stuff like that. And I do think that, you know, will be a net positive for like kind of a new global paradigm shift almost, you know?
How do you fire back up the presidential campaign after this? Like, I don't see in any situation where we want to go back to listening to a Democratic debate of two old men yelling at each other about the direction of our country. You know, I don't like, how do you fire that back up and have people listen to it again? I don't see it.
Well, I think it'll bring a sense of normalcy that people will be starving for. It's like, equate it to sports, you know, because of the revenue,
Yeah.
because of the revenue, they're going to do some kind of bullshit playoff in sports that will kind of suck and isn't fair to, you know, the history of the sport or whatever. And it probably won't have spectators, and it'll be really weird. It'll be all like broadcast, you know, whatever. And I'm going to watch it. People are going to watch it. You know, we want fucking sports, like, but it's kind of bullshit, you know, and the election's going to be the same way. Except now I can guarantee you the talking points, you know, like they ain't going to talk about the wall this time around, you know?
I've been watching a little bit of the president talk about, and just I consider him a propagandist, a really good propagandist. And I keep watching at what he says and the words he uses and the little nuggets that are being, little phrases that are being used. And so, like, his is China, right? So he keeps throwing China out there. And he says, when this is all over. And all I see at the end of this, and I see this as wrapping up before the election. So we have a month or two of post-election, but that post-election, maybe it's delayed. But either way, he gets to do a victory lap, which he's really good at. And remember after 9/11, Bush's approval rating jumped to 90%, something like that. It was like 88% from 45. Because the Supreme Court elected him president. He wasn't the winner.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't popular at all. And then after 9/11, he was the hero, because that's what stories need. They need a hero after a tragedy. It doesn't matter who's there. And so it could have been, if this was Hillary, she would have been the hero. So when there's an election, maybe there won't be, but if there's an election, then he just runs with it, because he's using his propaganda campaign. He's throwing things out there. He's going to call China the bad man. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just an easy win. And I think you can. That's why I think if it's 4 months, 6 months, you can get people back into that mindset. You can have them focused on elections again, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But the longer it is, the harder it is to cram them back down into Biden versus Buttigieg or something like that.
Yeah. I think the Democratic primary is over now. You know, this killed it. It's obviously just, you know, they're going to go with Biden. And I do think, yeah, you're right. You tell people they can go back to work and give them a $3,000 check or whatever, and they'll go right back into Team Blue versus Team Red. Like, you know, they'll just be even more fired up and ready to hear bullshit and ready to fall for bullshit. You know, like I think, and so I agree that, you know, that transition won't be as hard as the transition of like getting people to realize like, oh shit, nothing's really the same anymore. Like this is a completely different economy now, and you know, that part, I don't know. I'm
Well,
also worried. Oh, go ahead.
what if somebody steps up? So you keep seeing the approval rating of Trump drops significantly over the next few months because everybody's just grumpy and they just throw it all on him, which is fair. But then somebody else steps up, Bernie Sanders, and says this is absolutely ridiculous. And the first person to step up and take charge, even just in name only, could stand a chance of coming either back into a race or shifting the way we view politics and that political process.
Yeah. Well, I've said that too, that is like, I hope this is the thing that shakes people's belief in government so much that now we actually have a legitimate third party that arises out of it, and I think that is definitely a positive or a potential outcome, but I think it wouldn't be until the next presidential election. Like that would need time to build. Um, Mainly too, because the way the fucking system is, it's set up to not have that happen because you have to have had so much money and so much this. You can't come in at the last second and be a write-in vote or anything like that, like that. The system is just stopped.
Yeah.
It's kept us from doing that, and the electoral college would vote against that, and it wouldn't happen. But I think in the next 4 years after this election, a third party, a party of the people, whatever, could arise from this, because I think like they're going to just try to fire up the red versus blue machine again, and people are going to be like, you guys aren't talking about the issues that are important, you're just yelling at each other, and we're done with that. And I could see a third party being legitimate, but I don't know. I'm open to, I could see anything happening. This is completely uncharted waters. I mean,
and so if there's anything that happens, then let's kind of move on to like the psychedelic stuff, where we can where we can create, or we can attach onto whatever narrative is the trending narrative, things that and information that people can relate to, that are psychedelic, and just start throwing more content out there. And we have, instead of meeting people in person, which is, it's harder to talk about psychedelics in person than it is as an avatar for most people. So now is a great time when everybody can distance themselves from another person to take in information that they hadn't before and consider it.
Yeah, I do think that, I mean, look at the last psychedelic revolution in this country. It came out of like Vietnam in a very real scary time, and that's when people started talking about, Timothy Leary was talking about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and all this stuff, and like, I think that could be what happens here. Like I've actually thought about, just with kind of how our podcast has kind of evolved and talking about different topics. I've changed where like I didn't really like share my podcast with a lot of like people that weren't down in my, real life, or like friends from school, high school and stuff like that or whatever. But like I've been getting it out there more. Like when I've seen people arguing on social media, I'll like send them a link, be like, check out this episode if we had an episode talking about that specific thing or whatever. And, I've been more open and sharing, because it's like, well, why the fuck not? Like, yeah, we're off the map right now. And I think the psychedelic crowd has a point of view that can help people, and like, we're not going to help people keeping that to ourselves.
Yeah, especially you got a lot of people who are having anxiety and are not grounded. They're grounded to their abstractions, to their identities and their jobs and stuff like that, their lifestyles. And now that they're lost, I mean, a lot of people are lost. We don't know what the future is. And because the future was written, in 5 years I retire and then I get my house, whatever. But we can, getting people into, that's where I was going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I talked about that in the last podcast of like, yeah, the future might have been written for a lot of baby boomers of like, oh, I'm retiring next year. We're gonna, sell our house and get a condo or get a motorhome and or whatever, like you had some plan that you're not going to be able to do now. And it's like, instead of wallowing in that and being upset and, then just being like, well, now I got to work till I die or whatever. I really hope the psychedelic community can be a landing spot for a lot of those people, in that, like, okay, you don't have enough money to retire and not do anything and just play golf, but maybe you have enough money to go on an ayahuasca trip and reevaluate your entire life and come back and be motivated to start a nonprofit that, helps people have psychedelic experiences and or whatever, or you go in and start a retreat with someone or whatever. Like, there's going to be people like that like, oh shit, okay, yeah, I can go in this direction. This is going to be much more satisfactory for the rest of my life than actually even what I had planned, just sitting on my money, and so I think that's a very good thing that the psychedelic community has to be open to, is that you're going to have a lot of people, and a lot of older people, that might be having their reality shattered and are looking for answers and go on a spiritual quest instead of a being upset about the financial situation that unfolded.
And you have the back to the trauma and mental health is what I was getting at. So you have a lot of people who are dealing with anxiety, and we can start throwing ideas about microdosing out there,
yeah,
and how to grow your own mushrooms or stuff like that. And and then afterward, when people go to all the clinics and start trying to process this trauma, because after war you have to process the trauma, as I found out in a very difficult way last year. So you have to take whatever happened to you and then work through it. And if you don't, then you're going to maintain you're going to bury it, and then it'll come back up. But maybe psychedelics can happen and can help to alleviate those problems. It's a great. So this could be a good thing for MAPS, not just as an organization, but just their goal.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that the other ways of dealing with anxiety and depression, because, like, think of how many people who are already on the standard psychiatric prescription medicine for anxiety and depression, and now being in their home for a month or two and everything, it's like worse, and the medication's not doing anything. They're going to be looking for alternative method, and yeah, I think the mushrooms will be sitting right there going like, well, give us a try.
I had a microdose the other day, and it helped a lot with homeschooling the kids. And it was just barely, but they were having troubles, and I was just helping them with it. It was nice. It's great to have that break.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been doing the same, and I recommend it.
I hadn't thought of, Rich, what you brought up about everybody coming out of this on the other side with like, traumatic, PTSD type symptoms for just staying at home all day and just dealing with this. I hadn't yet thought of that. I mean, that alone is going to hopefully bring a ton of people over to the psychedelic side. I hadn't thought, though.
Well, you got all these parents that are used to their life and send their kids away because they can't deal with them, or they don't want to, or something like that. And dealing with your kids isn't traumatic, but the sudden change of lifestyle is for a lot of people, and it's not something. It's not a war. It's not an earthquake or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when your default reality is Starbucks, Netflix, and 6 hours of sleep, or 4 hours of sleep, and go to work, if that's your default reality, then the slightest, and then if you lose your job, then you get anxious. Well, you didn't just lose your job; you lost your future. There is no money. There's your kids are at home from school, and your entire vision of the world has been disrupted. And so that may not be a lot for people who have experienced really difficult trauma, but it's difficult enough for those people. That's all relative.
Yeah.
I think definitely the idea out there when people argue about taxes and stuff like that. The idea that teachers get paid too much, that will go away now after this experience for most people, like that are having to take over the teacher's job, and to understand like the structure and discipline and everything like that school is important for kids. I think everyone's going to realize that now that they are in charge of that aspect of their kids' life. And and I forgot to ask, bring you into the perspective there, Stan, when we were talking about like how to handle um, a traumatic situation like this. It's
Mm-hmm.
different when we have kids. We have to provide structure for other people and hold down a unit. Um, I know you live with your girlfriend, but other than that, you aren't really responsible for anybody other than you two. So like how where's that got your head in all of this?
It's nice, man. No,
So,
no, I mean, I'm approaching it the same way you guys are, like I'm a pretty optimistic person always. I try to let any negative thoughts or controversial thoughts or things like that come through my mind, I let them go as quick as I can so I can get towards like a hopeful existence, and looking at things in a hopeful light. So I'm just trying to keep that going. The other day, though, I was like smoking, and I think I took an edible in the morning, and the reality set in. When you have that like clear moment when you're stoned, and it's just like, whoa, I'm sitting here in the middle of this pandemic in a city that's self quarantined already. I was like, that's kind of nuts. But then, like, immediately I go right back into the positive thinking and just like knowing that I'll get through it with the skills that I have, and the help of everybody around me and the community we have here. So I think I'm approaching it the same way, I just don't have little ones looking up to me or anything like that.
Yeah. I find it hard because it's like, man, I really want to like just focus on abstract thought and abstract content and all of I really want to get to like the existential meaning of all this, but it's like at the same time I have to be like, hey, your teacher sent a link, you got to do this math thing, or whatever, or stop hitting your brother, or uh whatever, like wash your goddamn hands, like that's like I'm a hand washing Nazi, like, and whatever. So I could see that in your situation, like you can kind of like, yeah, let yourself go to the abstract
Yeah.
for quite a while. And and yeah, if you're maintaining that positive mindset, like the danger of the situation, you can leave that behind, because it's like you can focus on just have belief in the positive outcome of everything, and let yourself go to the wins, of the abstract kind of situation we're in. And so I definitely envious of people in that situation.
Yeah, I live a pretty self quarantined life,
Yeah.
so it's not like too much has changed, other than certain places being closed and whatever, like not being able to go to the gym, stuff like that. But I mean, I could already see that like my girlfriend who's in school and has a outside of home job and all of that, like getting kind of stir crazy, and just we're just trying to find ways to, whether it be yoga or just like fucking around at home with like video games or, whatever, just trying to find ways to not ignore those thoughts of like, wow, I got to get out of here, but just kind of smooth them out to the point that it's there, but it's not a panic thought. It's more of I know it's there, but I'm not going to act on it type thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm envious of people in your situation, but I'm also rising, rising to the challenge of like, okay, but I also have to like raise two dudes
Yeah.
to have a good understanding of what they just went through, because they're going through something that's fucking crazier than, like, I went through 9/11, and that's
Hmm.
a crazy time, but that's the last time that ever had the gravity that this has, and this is even more. This is more like, you mentioned when we were talking about politics that Bush is approval rating went up. Well, that was an enemy you could shoot at. And so people can be like, yeah, he's going to keep us safe. He's going to shoot the bad guys. This you can't shoot at. Like, you have to fucking grin and bear it. This problem.
Nah, but with enough propaganda, he can make it China or whatever.
Well, right, and that's where
Exactly.
the government finger pointing goes. But you know what I'm getting at is, like, it's a perfect opportunity to raise two dudes that will have a greater understanding of the power of acceptance, of being like, this is the reality, but we're gonna benefit from it. We're gonna come out of it stronger. And so I have that opportunity to put two more people in the world that have that outlook. And so, like, I'm grateful to be in that position. I'm grateful to have worked on myself to the point to be able to handle this. If this would have happened 10 years ago, like when I first became a dad, I was super scared about everything. Like, I remember, like, I got into prepping because I saw the Walking Dead and I had just become a parent, you know, and like, I was like, oh my God, a zombie apocalypse could happen. And like, so I got into all that stuff 10 years ago, and I've calmed down, but I understand the importance of emergency preparedness. So, like, I'm taking all this in stride, and my wife freaked out a little bit at the start, but I told her, I was like, I was made for this moment right now. You're good, you know, and like, we're good. So, like, I'm grateful to be in that position, and I understand it, you know. So, but I do wish that, like, I didn't have the responsibility and I could really, really, you know, dive into, you know, the abstract of this. And so, you know, I think that'd be a good transition to kind of explore some of the conspiracy theory around this. And so, for anyone that hasn't heard our last episode, please listen to that first, because we talk about the very real, you know, in the moment situation of how to look at this and how to handle this. And that's very important. And I think for the, you know, most part, that episode would be a little bit government approved, but I think this is a situation where you need to question everything. And I don't buy fully into a lot of the conspiracy theory, but everyone that throws me some stuff that it's like, you're not being told the truth, I see through the media, I go down the rabbit hole and internalize it and kind of see, you know, include it into my big picture of how I view everything. And so, you know, the one thing that kind of has the most credibility, I would say, that is Rich. You sent me on a rabbit hole with, I had not heard of Event 201, and you sent a video, and I kind of followed up on that. So let me just kind of like go through my understanding of why that's a weird little thing, and then, you know, if you can add your aspect to it. But so it all centers around Bill and Melinda Gates, and for some reason, you know, Bill Gates has been very interested in the danger of a virus pandemic for a while, and probably because he was listening to the people that I was talking to about, you know, that have been yelling in meetings about the danger and being ready for this pandemic and stuff like that. He gave a TED talk about virus pandemic, specifically coronavirus. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with some other people, have owned patents on different coronavirus species and strains, supposedly for to aid in the benefit of developing vaccines. And then in October, they sponsored an event that Johns Hopkins University put on, where it was basically like a mock global pandemic conference, you know, and like pretending like it happened, and then having government, you know, people pretending to be government officials and different experts and stuff like that, and talk about all the ramifications and treatment options and how to handle it. And this was in October, when there was probably already the outbreak happening in China. It just wasn't being reported. And then, you know, the final piece of that Bill Gates kind of weird timing thing is that he stepped down from the board of Microsoft like a week before it was announced that the outbreak hit the United States. So first off, do I have kind of that summed up pretty good? And, you know, what is your take? Because I've seen a lot of people talking about that, like, there really isn't a virus going on, and this is just all part of that. This is wave 2 of that event 201, and this is how they're a real life test run of like how it would happen and stuff like that. So like, what's your take on the event 201 kind of thing?
Well, you asked about Bill and Melinda Gates, but I don't know that side of the conspiracy theory. But what I found really interesting was that it was a mock. Was it back in November? They had people doing a mock. Let me restart. They have a board, but it's a mock board, and somebody would stand up there, and actors would ask questions. So they kind of played with there was LARPing, live action role playing, and then they had fully published or produced news programs. Kind of what I think it's if you're going to do something like this and you want to push a certain message, then you put something out beforehand to train people how to deal with the situation. Here's what to expect, and here's how to deal with it, and here's how to push a narrative in the media, how to actually lock it down. It's way too timely for it to. It's so weird, and it's one of those things that reminds me of some of the other big events where there were practices beforehand, or like 9/11, they had a practice event scheduled for that day, or whatever the theory was.
Yeah. I mean it. So. Well, yeah, first off, I guess I dove down the rabbit hole more than you because it's all tied to Bill Gates. And I mean, and there's been a lot of, over the course of the last year, a lot of CEOs have stepped down. And I was all thinking it was tied to the markets and that we're about to crash. And they didn't want to be, in charge of, or they didn't want to own that aspect of, the history of their company or whatever. But, it also goes into all those, conspiracy theory stuff. Well, I think it's real, but that billionaires have these like missile silo underground mansions and all that. And it's like, are all these motherfuckers getting ready and going down in there? Like the head of Disney stepped down the week before the coronavirus got to the U.S. and like stuff like that. It's like, is that what was going on or what? But I mean, I guess we can chalk up the event 201 in October as just dumb luck that it was right before there was an actual outbreak, or it's like, was that the test run, knowing what was coming, and you do it under the guise of like, oh, it's just a mock thing, but they were actually trying to hash out like what would really happen and involve more people than just government cabinet members. I don't know, but it's super fucking fishy to me. And it goes back to like, even at a time like this, like, and I think Stan said, it's like, I've been living my whole life not listening to the government, but now all of a sudden I'm supposed to be scared into listening to them, And so I think that's what makes it makes times like this so ripe for conspiracy theory, especially when, it's you can see evidence that supports conspiracy theory, but it's like at the same time, there's so much shit that can be faked nowadays, from video to, fake research papers, audio, everything can be fake. So like how, I mean, I don't know how you can really trust everything. Like Donald Trump, for instance, maybe the reason his press conferences are going so bad is because he, and this is way out there woo-woo, but maybe he already died from the coronavirus and they're just making deep fakes off of like pre-existing press conferences. And so it's just kind of like rehashing these stupid things that are like, that could kind of relate to this. Okay. I don't know. You can't, this is a time period where you have to question everything. It all will come back to like, okay, but I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of my family. And in a time like this, the reality in front of me, I have to handle this. But the abstract thought, there's no limit to it because anything's on the fucking table. It's so goddamn weird. So the Event 201 thing has the most credibility because that was published in YouTube, 4 or 5 months ago. You can watch it. All the patents and everything are are there to view about Bill Gates. All of that is very real. It's just fishy timing. The other conspiracy theory that like I don't really buy into, but I wanted to see what you thought about it because I know you distrust government as much as I do. Is the idea that this is a bioweapon, that this was created in a lab and set out onto the world by either the United States, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, China, Russia. You can follow anybody. Like, there's a lot of people saying this is a bioweapon, and depending on what they're trying to prove that it shows, they will blame it on something else. Have you followed any of those conspiracy theories, and what would your thought on that being a possibility be?
Yeah, I'm more familiar with this one. The BSL, or the bio, it's labs where they work with viruses and diseases and stuff like that. I was looking, so you have one that came out of Wuhan, and Dr. Li Wenliang, and he was the first to sound the alarm, and then he was censored by China. And then China a few days ago said, "Hey, I know he's dead, but we apologize. We shouldn't have censored him." And so he was the one to first call the alarm. And I don't think that it was intentional. I think it was an accident. But that still raises a lot of questions as to why people are making bioweapons, because there are BSLs, these labs that are everywhere, all over the world, including Fort Detrick and in the United States. And so, I went on Fort Detrick's website and started looking around at how they design their lab and what precautions they use and stuff like that, what their hazmat suits look like. And so you get an idea of what they're working with. And it's all under the Defense Department. And the Defense Department is never the Defense Department. It's always the Offense Department. So if you're playing around with these bioweapons, it doesn't matter if they are going to be used or not. Why are you making them? Why do you continue to make these terrible weapons? And I think it's not a conspiracy. It's just something that's happening. And if that's happening, then there needs to be an end to that. That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter if you're Chinese, American, or whatever. You're a human being. We don't play with that. We can work with, and I really think working with the theory of it would be a lot better. I don't know, because you have the science, you have the scientist that wants to tinker and maybe create the vaccine, like Bill and Melinda Gates, but then you're also playing with a deadly weapon that can do the things that it's doing right now, starting to do.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely recommend everyone, at a time where we're all have time to listen to podcasts now. I really recommend TWIV, like This Week in Virology, but for whatever reason on the Google podcast thing, you have to actually search by TWIV. But it's put out by the American Society of Microbiology. It's all these professors and researchers it's just virus talk. I mean, they talk about what's going on and how to handle it. But what's interesting is because they're not government officials, they're not as scared. Like, they're just talking about the virus and the symptoms and how you can stop yourself from getting it, and why on a large scale general public health thing, we need to social distance in order to stop the spread. But the numbers and statistics, they kind of break that down in a non-doom and gloom way, and it really calms down. But they kind of talk about that. I mean, they disregard the lab created aspect of this virus pretty quick whenever they answer emails, and whenever that email comes up, they're like, there's nothing in the markers, the DNA, the RNA, there isn't DNA in this virus, it's just RNA, but there's nothing in it that any scientist has been like, yeah, this was created in a lab. They're like, there's nothing like that. But they've tackled that idea of like, could that happen? And they were like, listen, there could be rogue virologists that work for different governments and whatever, and are working on this stuff. But they haven't seen that, the evidence of that in come out, like it's a possibility, but there's no reason to think it's a for certain thing. They did say that, like you mentioned, that Bill and Melinda Gates, why they have a patent on this virus is because they have people working on it to make a vaccine. That every now and then, virus research has small outbreaks that are contained to the facility. They said that someone working with Ebola a couple years ago had an outbreak, and like somebody died that worked in the office, but like a bunch of people got sick, and like this does happen frequently, just because of like people fuck up. Like people fuck up your Burger King order, but people fuck up working on viruses too. Like that's just human nature. And that if something got out that was so contagious that it escaped the lab, and then it escaped, spread, especially if it can spread without symptoms like this, and it just spread from those lab workers out until it was 2 weeks later and they realized it got out of the lab, there could be in China like a cover up of like, okay, well, we're going to say this came from a meat market and not from the lab. Like they don't want to take responsibility for it. Not that it was planned, but that it's an accident they don't want to take. And they were like, that's much more plausible.
That's where happened. I'm at.
Yeah. And so like, I see that. I'm sure there is shady governments making bioweapons with plans to potentially try to release it. And I'm, like you said, I'm sure that our government is probably more guilty of that than any other one. But unfortunately, like, I think much like we said about the political finger pointing, is like that conspiracy theory of this is a bioweapon is going to fuel a lot of that finger pointing. And lead to war. I think like there's no way we get out of this without a depression, and there's no way we get out of this without war. And I think I think the bioweapon narrative is going to like fuel that, and so I don't know.
I was so sad the other day when the president said we are at war with a virus. I was just like, God, not motherfucking war.
I know. Yeah.
I thought we were done, man. This guy, I'm against presidents, but he was not engaging in new wars.
Yeah,
He's like, we don't have time for that. He said, let's bring our people home, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is great. This is a great lull, because the response to Trump is going to be crazy tyranny, socialist tyranny.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I can see him getting wrapped up in the China thing, just like he got wrapped up in the immigrant thing. And now, and he just said the word war, and I'm like, I hate that other people. And I saw a few online articles that were talking about it's wartime. We need to treat this as if it's wartime. Like, no, don't use that word, because if you keep using that word, then it's planted in people's heads, and they're fine with war if you keep saying the word war. And I've just said it about 15 times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
was the same thing on the Democratic stage. The last debate they had, Biden, who was probably going to get the nomination, he was saying that it's an invisible enemy that we have to go to war with, and it's just like, come on, guys. It's like, come on.
This isn't. We're going to cooperatively.
Yeah, we're terrible at winning wars anyway. So I don't know why that's what people want to hear our politicians equate stuff to. Like that's another thing we're going to lose then, apparently. But
doesn't matter if you win or lose your war. It's what you tell your people.
Yeah.
The last war we lost was Vietnam, according to everybody listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's that's one reason I don't like the bioweapon narrative, whether it's whether it's true or not. That's not the narrative I want to follow with my consciousness, I guess. And
I like playing with the QAnon LARP. That's so much fun. I get deep into that one. About QAnon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I pay attention to that when I dive in there about once a week, and it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, what's that crowd think? I mean, because they're following that China did this on purpose, right? Or is QAnon on a different kick right now?
No, I don't think that they're pushing the China thing. What they're looking at is that this is the opportunity for martial law. So before the virus, it was back in January, February, they said Trump is the deep state will be rooted out when routed out. And once there's martial law, you can't do it without martial law. So he's going to round up all these deep state people and finally put Hillary in jail and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, right. This is a cover for all the mass arrests of the deep state, right?
Right. And the other day he did say the deep state department. So he's still on that. I mean, he did meet with Alex Jones online. Yeah. So he's somewhat bent toward conspiracies. I mean, he's the one who pushed Obama and being a Muslim or something like that. Yeah. Or was from a different country. Yeah. So he's invested in it, and I hold out like that 2% chance that that's going to happen. I mean, that's dictatorship, but I mean, I don't see much difference between dictatorship and this right now.
Yeah. No,
and what if he postpones the November election too?
Oh man, yeah, and he's like, we don't need, the last thing we need right now is government turnover, and we need to get ourselves through this. And yeah, I could see that
exactly.
And I could see people being scared and bored enough in their house that they're cool with it. I mean, they would have to ramp it up now. I don't think people are at the mental state now, but after a month being home, maybe, I don't know. I mean,
they supposedly this week there is going to be a national stay-at-home quarantine. Yeah. So I mean, Ohio that's the beginning. Yeah, that's the beginning of all of it. You know what I mean? Like my cousin has a friend who's a National Guard member, and he called them saying that they're all being deployed and it should be in the next 2 to 3 days. So to like go get whatever you need now.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be fucking hell go to the Walmart, in 2 days when they announce it and they say, oh, by the way, you have 24 hours to get your shit. Let's go. It's like supermarket sweep.
Yeah.
I want to say something on that, on the coming occupation. And, seeing the other side of war, where you can look into the civilians' eyes and know that they're an occupying force. They're being occupied by somebody in a uniform. I think we'll all get a chance to live under an occupying force. We have been mentally, but then now we get to see it in physical action when we see Humvees and trucks rolling down the street, and it's still less imposing on our lifestyle. It's still not threatening. These people aren't coming to hurt us. They are coming to help us through this time, right? But it's still an occupying force. And so what that does for me is makes me think of the other people that the U.S. military has occupied all across this globe. And that if you feel uncomfortable with the National Guard locking down a bridge and cutting off one state from another or something like that, then that's 1/5, or it's so much less intense than being on the other side of an occupying force in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, all these things. And I think if you can keep that in mind, I'm so stuck in war mode, but if you can keep that in mind, then the decisions that you make when you vote for people or when you participate in systems like taxation, and that this money is going to go to drones that'll drop bombs on families, then maybe this is the chickens coming home to roost for us, where our own military is locking us down and occupying not only our heads but our physical reality. And that's still not half as bad as the foreign policy that's unleashed across the world by the United States military.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll make it real for people, like
make it real.
Once stuff's on your doorstep, you look at it differently. That's for damn sure,
That's what that brings up trauma in my head. Mm-hmm. Stan, I think if you see mm-hmm. people rolling down the street and you can't go anywhere, you're being occupied, and that's traumatic.
Yeah.
You're being against your will.
Yeah, no, I saw, this was like a week and a half ago, even maybe a week, because time is definitely getting warped for me because of all this. But there was a video posted from Italy, and their situation's a lot worse and less under control, it seems, than the current in the United States. But, there's people in hazmat suits walking the streets spraying shit. So it's like, it's going to be it's going to be a weird visual. That's for sure. If it ever comes to happen.
Yeah. And, I'm thinking that that's only going to be an urban situation. So it's like, that might be something that you see, Stan, and it becomes very real for you. But I may still be sitting on my cul-de-sac like, what the fuck's everyone talking about? I don't, there's no, so like, I don't know how that will all play out. I don't know. I mean, it's really weird, but again, it all comes down to that, like, and this is why, like, I try listening to non-government based health officials and scientists, is that the government is making all these, is going to institute this occupation, like you said, based on the worst case scenario of one model of what could happen population wise. And they're preparing and handling it all and spending the money on the worst case scenario. And that, like they were saying on the last episode of This Week in Virology, that like models are wrong and they're usually wrong. And that government officials need to, it's just like everyone should do, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I do think we're preparing for the worst. I think a lot of the situation in Italy is that they didn't act quick enough. So that's why we acted so quick. And their healthcare system is overrun, and they're having to decide. They don't have enough ventilators for everyone, which we don't either. And that should be the overall lesson from all of this, even if it goes back to normal. It's like our healthcare system's fucked, and we're not prepared for like emergencies. Like that should be what we're all noticing. But that they're having to let people die of this. That isn't people. A lot of the death numbers coming out of Italy, it isn't like we did all we could for them. It's like they had to like not give them a respirator because they were older and they needed to try to save somebody else or whatever. And like, yeah, I mean, that's the scary thing of that is everyone's trying not to become Italy, but it's also like not for sure that we would become Italy too, and that's the worst case scenario. And there's also, and this is really weird that I remember this, but I took a class on GIS software, geographical information software.
Yeah.
And I had to take the night class, and the guy that taught it was actually the GIS guy for the county health department. And one of the maps that he did that we were working on was a flu pandemic. And he was like, it was a hypothetical flu pandemic, but it was all the technical stuff about how to make the map. But he was like, well, I work for the health department. So, and he was this Russian immigrant, and like, he just had kind of I would stay and talk with him after class. I did that with a lot of professors anyway, but like he was one that I would stay and talk with him. And he was talking about like the role of the health department is to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And the way they prepare for the worst is they know that like if it's a flu pandemic, there's a certain percentage of the people in the area that's going to be affected or that you're responsible for that aren't going to do a goddamn thing. And the more serious the threat is, the less that number is, the more serious the threat is, the more people will take it seriously. But that there's always an understanding, like we're seeing now, there's kids down partying in spring break, making out and fucking in cars and whatever. And, they're like, who gives a shit? And then they're going to go back to their town, to where they're from and spread that around. They know that that's a certain percentage that is before they even mentioned anything about lockdowns. They were like, okay, so this percentage of people are going to spread it. We know that. So we need to scare enough people to get the people that stay inside and do pay attention to this level. And, because even though they're a government health official and they have a doctor in front of their name and they know about this stuff, they're also part of the government. They're also kind of a politician. And so they're going to spread the information that is the worst case scenario to scare the most people into staying home. And I don't know if maybe that wasn't working and they weren't seeing the numbers. And then so they're like, okay, now there's going to be a national lockdown. I don't know, what's happening there. But I do know I've been trying to keep an eye on the numbers, and like the mortality rate of this virus has not changed at all. The numbers of new infected are going up because they're testing more and more people. And that's just going to continue. This is a pandemic. This virus, the RO factor of how contagious it is will not change. And it looks like the mortality rate will not change. So, like they're just trying to keep forcing that down. And the more that the government says that, and more they're like, oh, now there's this many, now there's this many, now there's this many. Like people just keep getting scared and keep following orders and be okay with the thing. But nothing's changed. If everyone had an understanding of what the reality of the situation is, like, I don't think there would be the panic and stuff. It's like the government's ramping up the panic almost. And that'll lead to people being okay with, like you said, the occupation.
Anything. Yep.
Yeah. And so and I like the psychology of this. I don't know if I said this in the last podcast, but I've been trying to really tell people this. So if you look at the global fatality rate of this virus, which is also not accurate because the people getting tested are ones that went to the hospital or for whatever reason, got tested. But there's a lot of people walking around that are untested, which means if they're not going to die, the mortality rate would be lower. But anyway, it averages out to 3.8%, I think I saw. So take that to round that up to 4. And if you took 100 people and put them in a room and said, hey, if you get this virus that's going around, 4 of you are going to die. All 100 of those people are going to go, oh shit, I'm going to fucking die. I'm going to fucking die. Like, that's it. Oh, fuck, But if you took the same 100 people and put them in a room and just for the sake of the statistics said something good would happen, like, okay, if you invest in Bitcoin, 4% of you may double your money in 4 years. Like those numbers aren't the same. I'm just using them, the positive, negative mindset. Almost all 100 people would say, that's not me. I'm not gonna be one of those 4 people, like I'm not gonna invest in Bitcoin or whatever. I'm not trying to like cram Bitcoin into the conversation, but like people can be convinced that the worst is going to happen to them and deny the positive aspect of like, I'll probably be okay, because that's the thing. You can look at it. The mortality rate is 4%, but it's 96% that you're not going to die if you get this. And nobody's thinking they're in that 96%. Everyone thinks they're in that 4%,
Yeah.
It's just interesting the way that works. And the way the government health officials talk is like, it's so exaggerated. Like, I don't know if you guys noticed, this is, old news now at this point, but when the governor in Ohio first came out, the leading health official for Ohio came and talked after him and said, there's probably 100,000 people who would test positive in Ohio right now. And then, so everyone's like, holy shit, for a day, is like scared as fuck. And then she had to come out the next day and be like, well, I was guesstimating. And it's like, well, you're the goddamn expert everyone's thinking they need to look at, and you're fucking guesstimating. Like, fuck you, And so, like, I don't know. A lot of people are giving me, like, my family's all giving me shit for like not believing the government here. And I'm like, that's 0.1 right there. Very real in my state of why I don't believe the government in this, I'll follow the rules and whatever, but like, I don't think they're doing the best thing. And I think we will see that over time. Unfortunately, this situation is so bizarre that the perfect solution will only be found through hindsight,
Well, and the numbers are totally fucked now because China's saying that there's no new cases and nobody's dying there anymore, which is just hilarious that we're supposed to believe that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just that all of this stuff is being predicated off of numbers that really are inaccurate and being done on the fly. And like, we don't know the whole picture, and there's way too many variables, and, there's way too much like shame going on. Like, there's too many people like, this is not a joking matter, and all the goddamn memes and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I had someone yelling at me on Facebook, and, they were like, well, I'm sorry, I feel for all the people that are dying from this. And, I wanted to point out, and this will change because of how rampant this virus is going to be. But currently, more people died from malaria yesterday than the coronavirus. And so, like, nobody's, mourning those losses because that's been happening for generations, now that's confined to certain areas, but still it's areas nobody gives a shit about. And those people just fucking died. And nobody's like reporting those numbers every day. More people die from tuberculosis more people died from tuberculosis every day than died in the event of 9/11. And nobody's like, going like, oh, we got to get rid of tuberculosis. Like people fucking die. And so like I think that will be the realization we come to with this. And I had a quote of like, even if death is coming for you, if you can't laugh in the face of death, then you're giving death more power than life. And I don't choose to do that. I choose to view life as the most powerful, or at least that they're even, I don't know. But I think like a sense of humor is the last thing that we need to lose from all this. We're obviously losing our freedom. We could lose our health. We could lose our life, but I don't think we need to lose our humor,
Yeah, and I want to go back to that Russian immigrant that was the health department. Sounds like some sort of a Russian plant.
That's entirely possible. I mean, there's some conspiracy theory there that, like,
Why did he know so much about this at that stage? It sounds a little premature. Maybe they had information about it. I don't even think Russia has cases of COVID. So I think it all ties into your class, really.
I did not think about that. But yeah, no, I mean, I totally didn't remember that talk that we had until I was like sitting there meditating, and I was like, holy shit, that fucking Russian teacher I had told me about flu epidemic, like the procedure for health departments. And I'm seeing that play out now, and it's hard for me to like tell people like, hey, this is what they do. Like, you shouldn't be as scared. Like, you should be prepared. You should be more afraid of, like, we're our own worst enemy, but like, this is how government's going to react. And like, they're following that plan, like, instead of being prepared ahead of time, they've decided to, go worst case scenario reaction to it.
Well, but we live by stoplight legislation. We can't do anything until something bad happens.
Right. Yeah. So, do you guys? We're at an hour and a half.
Let's end this. Let's end it on a positive note.
Okay. What do you suggest?
You were talking about simulation theory, right?
Right.
And so I got two different ways I can kind of look at this, right? So you're in a simulation, and you're so many days into it. I'm 50,543 right now, and so we have a virus that's been released into the simulation. And what that does is it allows you to, by thinking like that, it allows you to think about the systematic impact of all the resources and all the systems that it touches. Right. So if it takes people out of the jobs, then you have a labor department that's connected to a housing crisis, that's connected to a political structure, and then a military-industrial complex. So everything's connected, right? In this simulation. So like we talked about earlier, our resources are being tested, and our systems are as well. And then the other thought I had about simulation theory was the way of games. So if you're in a simulation, I think like what I spoke last podcast with you guys was, if you're in a simulation and you have all these things you can do, you can label them as games, things that you enjoy playing or kind of have to play. And so during this pandemic, during the quarantine, you can set all the things that you need to do in your life, because it's so much easier when things are you're forced to simplify, right? You have, I have it down to 4 games for my family, and that's my wife's job and my job, which is homeschooling the kids, right? So we have our means of income, and then the kids need to be homeschooled. That's another game. And then we decided one of our games is going to be helping other people. right? So community involvement. And then the other one is taking care, like physical and mental and spiritual care of ourselves. And so there you have 4 games that you can kind of look at and focus on. And when you do that, then you can throw all the other stuff out of the way. Like it's great now because, well, I'm an introvert right now anyway. But if we once had our minds fooled by meet and greets or chit chats or coffee gossip and all this kind of stuff, now you can just sit at home and plot out the few different games that you can play, because you can't play a lot of games right now, right? The volleyball tournaments have shut down. There's no real NCAA anymore. So all the things that you were focused on have gone away, and you can kind of focus on what you want to do during this quarantine, right? So I consider it like a prison where we're just kind of we're all stuck here. Okay, but I've been feeling like I've been in prison in my own body and my own experience for years, so I'm used to it. So I ground myself in my games of what needs to be done and how I want to treat them. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to explore what they really want to do with not only the time in quarantine, but when they leave it, that mentality comes with them. So if you focus and you exercise discipline while you're in the quarantine, then it's going to be a lot easier when you're done with the quarantine to stick to your own personal narrative and your personal life, and use game structure to do whatever is necessary afterwards. Because I mean, we'll be, a year after this, there won't be a quarantine. So, but there will be the experiences that we gain from it. Not like games.
Yeah. I think with like the simulation theory idea of like, programs, and that programs need to change, and like you can change your own program at any time, or whatever. But I also think there's like the overall program that, can change. Much like, the Ascension crowd would call that like 5D consciousness, 4D consciousness, all that kind of stuff. Like I think the simulation theory kind of feeds into that too. Just different terminology, but it is interesting that I think this could be a chance for a lot of people to upload to a new program of, self-reliance, like you said. And also, I saw a video, I'll post it to the Discord, of Max Kaiser talking about transcendentalism. And I didn't research what that really is, but what he talks about is it's more like following a culture of like people following their gut or their intuition. And it's like, that's the program I could see could come out of this. That's option C in the slave plantation house burning down analogy I used or whatever. And it's interesting to me from a biology standpoint that could be started by a virus. And that kind of feeds into simulation theory or anything where, this could be a computer, because we use the term virus. Well, in biology, viruses technically aren't alive. They're rogue code that can change the code of organisms, and it makes them sick or whatever. But like on a large scale level, it could be a virus that is injected into the program to change it for a lot of the people, playing or whatever, living it. And so it's kind of interesting that it's a virus. We already use that term for computer programs and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty interesting. I was kind of having that abstract thought about it.
But if viruses destroy the weakest parts, that like you're only strong as your weakest link. So if the virus comes and destroys the weakest parts, and our weakest parts is the vulnerability of attacks to the system, then the system might go. And then that's where we have the opportunity to really be thoughtful about what we want to do. Not just head thoughtful, but heart thoughtful. And And now I'm just thinking utopia.
Yeah, I mean, we can rewrite the program, and it's entirely possible that the person playing the game or writing the code for the programs or whatever is like injecting the code in to like change the program, and that code takes the form of a virus to our consciousness, and but it is just interesting to think about that it's like our president is declaring war or whatever. We're doing all this stuff towards this thing that it's not alive, it's just a thing. Like, that's what's so weird about viruses is like they're code. Much like at our core, we're code. We're our DNA, and all our DNA is a code made up of 4 different things and a different combination of them. And that's what makes us everything that there is, other than maybe our spirit. I would argue that, but for the most part, like everything that is based on DNA. And a virus, all it is an instrument to change that, that code. And so like everyone's like, oh, like bacteria are things that are eating things. And viruses are not that. Viruses are, 100 times smaller than a bacteria. And all they do, and all they're, meant to do, is provide selection selection pressure from an evolutionary biology standpoint. That's what viruses do, is provide selection pressure on populations of animals or plants too. There's viruses that infect plants and change them, change their code. Sometimes these are good things. Usually they're not, but it's because they select out, like you said, the weakest links, and I've also thought about that of like maybe, and it sounds bad, is like to just fucking let viruses just go rampant through fucking whatever, and like maybe that's our next stage in our evolution. I don't know, but I think it's more of a cultural, because we're more technologically aided now, so it's like we're less of a biological superorganism, and we're more of a technological superorganism as far as humans are concerned. So this virus changing that program on a macro level is probably what it's doing. It's a selection pressure, and it's going to get out the weakest links of our society. I like looking at it that way and just change our program. Well, yeah, man. We can wrap it up there, I guess. Thanks for coming on, and I know you weren't doing anything else, and nobody else is either. So I just want to put that out there of anyone like past guest or anyone who been listening, but hasn't had time to maybe throw their name out there to be a guest or whatever. Like, I'm having a hard time getting a hold of people and stuff and whatever. So like the mic is open for anyone that wants to be a guest and wants to add to this conversation. And I know it's going to be hard for us to talk about anything else other than this time. But I do want to be, the voice out there for the weird during this time. So if we can relate the weird to the very real issues in front of us, and anybody listening that thinks they can add to that, I definitely recommend. And I'm sure we'll have you back on before too long as well, Rich. I always like talking to you, and I appreciate everything you do for our community, man.
Yeah, buddy, reach out whenever.
Yeah.
And enjoy your quarantine.
Thanks.
You too, man.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.